one of the very important topic on data, which is primarily on data governance. So what we're going to do is today we're going to deep dive into data governance and we'll try to understand the different facets of data governance, why data governance is important. Plus, what is data governance actually? Is it like same as data quality? A lot of times when people speak about data governance, it might be just a word, but people are not very clear about what is data governance, right? Now, in very important sense, we have seen as part of the Dharma wheel also, data governance is something at the center. So, in organizations also, what happens is data governance you can consider, is more like an overarching layer, so all your data management layer, which is there, which takes care of your entire data life cycle across your different technologies using using different processes and being different set of people part of it. But what data governance does is it provides that kind of a direction and oversight, so for all the data management activities, because what happens is in a typically if an organization, if you see, there are multiple types of teams which might be there. You have finance, you have BIU, you have marketing, you have customer experience, you have so many different teams, business teams, operations teams, and all which are there. Now, each of them, there might be having different set of data practices, processes, and all. But whether it is the best out of him. So normally a lot of these teams they work in silos and they do things based on what they feel is good or right at a point in time. But over a period of time, what organizations have seen is primarily there is a lot of inconsistencies or immaturity primarily because of this silos kind of work. So one department you will see which has a good technical experience will be using the best technologies and some of the best methods, data management practices. But what happens is sometimes it might not be the same with the other teams, right? So what data governance teams tries to do is they try to exercise this kind of an authority control, right, across the entire management, right, from planning, monitoring, enforcement of these assets. And primarily, this is the function that you can oversee. It's an overarching layer. It will provide guidance. Now, data governance uh, takes inspiration from something you might have seen with respect to governments, right? So, like for example, if you'd say different economies have different government. Now, what is the role of a government, right? So, what government tries to do is tries to put governance on an economy. Now, if you see, there might be different types of governance also within that, right? So, the whole reason why the government is there is to ensure that there is peace, there are certain practices or policies that they are putting, which everyone in the entire country will start following. And not everyone can start taking their own decisions. Like for example, if you have some traffic controls. Now, why the traffic control policy is something there is being that so that everyone is following those rules. Otherwise, what will happen? There would be accidents. You start seeing people, you know, leaving, bypassing the signals and all. Similarly, you have IT department, income tax. So like, for example, to ensure that people are able to pay taxes on time and, the economy as a whole, there is a common vision the government will put. Let's say, for example, digital India, or we have something as a vision I put for 2030. Now, all of this make in India, for example. Now, so for example, these initiatives which the government starts put as a strategic level, you see everyone start following those norms, right? That guidelines, everyone. So there is a lot of common direction and vision that everyone starts having, right? So same thing, data governance also starts doing it. So rather than each of them working in silos, which each of them will be anyways would be working in their own capacity, but I want to put in certain kind of policies, certain kind of best processes, best practices, so that the organization as a whole can move to a common area. So similarly, you have corporate governance, like the same thing you see within organizations. Like in a organization, you have HR policy, for example. So like for example, leave policy. So that if I am at a very high level as a CDO, I am entitled to take as much leaves as possible. That's not the thing. So there are certain kind of guidelines and there are certain kind of best practices which everyone puts in, like on corporate governance, or you take even the government and all. So same goes for governance, data governance. Like even for your data, I might need to put in that how the data needs to be managed, what are the best practices, what kind of policies and controls, right? Now, as part of this, you'll see the scope of data governance will have certain key components, right? So it starts with the overall strategy, as I was mentioning, like what is the overall vision that you have, the overall strategy that you want to have, like for example, on the data strategy side of things, let's say I want to have a architecture, which is there on the cloud, something like a strategy that I put in. Or let's say I want to get my data strategy, data components all ISO certified, right? So there's a kind of thing that I'm trying to set up as a vision, and a vision based on which I would be working. Then based on that, across the different areas of data, across the different areas, you'll see that I need to start putting in different types of policies. Like for example, on the metadata management perspective, I will start putting in metadata policy. On data quality, I should ensure that there is a data quality policy. Similarly, on the other sides of things, like on data security, I should ensure that there should be a data security policy. On data access side, there should be data access and ownership policies, right? So there's different policies, and these policies are then broken down into standards, or the next part once you define the policy. So policies are at a high level. A detail of that would be there in your standards, right? So what are the best standards or best practices that you put in? And then within the standards, you have certain called in the processes, right? So for metadata management, supposedly if you want to onboard certain kind of metadata from a different for business, right? So what are the processes? What are the steps that are part of it? Who are the people that is part, right? So these are all the procedures that will come in within the standards. You can say separate procedure documents. Then one of the other thing which I was mentioning is this oversight. So this is also called as the stewardship, where a combination of these processes, like where you define who is gonna own, who is gonna approve it, who is gonna raise it, who needs to be notified. So all of that is part of a stewardship that you define the roles and responsibilities. Then one of the other thing is the issue management. So any of these components, any of these things that you try to define, there is also a kind of a issue management that you require to mention. So right from identifying, defining, escalating, and resolving the issues. So all of it is something that you define as part of the issue management lifecycle. Then on the data management projects, so each and every projects that happens on the data management, you will see data governance approval starts coming in, who will ensure that, whatever the new data management processes you're bringing in, or new solutions that you might be bringing, or new practices that you're bringing in, is aligning to the data governance policy that you have set in for the organization. Then you also have the methods that you can start doing the data asset valuations, right? So where you can start setting standards, procedures that you can start consistently defining the business value you want to start capturing. So I did mention you about this. This is another one interesting area which is happening, where you're now trying to consider data is like an asset, and based on that, you start creating the data valuation report. So we'll go see this in some of the sections going forward. Right, so this is the goal that comes in, and you can see that the definition that has been mentioned, and the three main goals that is mentioned as part of data governance. That is to enable the organization to manage the asset first. Second is to define, approve, communicate, and implement what are the different policies, principles, procedures, metrics, tools, which are responsible for data management, right? So for the effective working of data management, you have a data governance team who will put in these definitions, approval mechanisms, policies as part of policy procedures. And lastly, you will also see the monitoring, so you will also have to continuously monitor, you have to continuously keep on highlighting any gaps, and, ensure that these gaps are being mitigated, right? So these are all the best things that you would be able to say as part of it. Now, what are the different types of business drivers? Again, this is coming in as part of the context diagram. You'll see as part of the context diagram, there are different key components which are part of it. So one is the different types of inputs that will put into your data governance when you're trying to define your data governance, as a practice. So first is you do from an input perspective, you try to identify what is an overall strategy, what is the overall goal, because this also has to align with your management's objectives, right? So like, for example, one is management objective, second is regulatory compliance, from the regulations perspective, what are the regulatory requirements? Like, for example, you have all know, like we have the DPDP, that is a more of a regulation which is on the privacy side. But we also have in India now, we are working on the national data governance framework, right? We In some of the other countries, they have the national governance data governance frameworks, right? So you also try to align those objectives with the national regulations. Then what are the different IT strategies or goals? IT as a team, IT as a, one of the, stakeholders as part of the overall initiative. What are their strategies? What are their practices that they're looking into? What is the, from an organization perspective, like you require to also check some of these from a corporate governance perspective, what are their policies and standards? Then what is the culture within the organization? Now, something that you will see that there is also some of the code of conducts which some of the organizations they put in. Some of the organizations have certain cultural requirements or cultural things, like for example, you know, promoting women diversity or some of these things. Like, so each of them, that will come under the people aspect when you start hiring or start looking in. So you also try to focus more on the women leaderships and these kind of things. But when you're defining your data governance framework, the people aspect will take care of that. So like this, when you start looking at each of your other components, you'll start seeing and aligning that visions also as part of it. Then once you do that, one of the other thing is you also try to do your current data quality or data maturity, sorry, your current data maturity that you have, right? So data maturity assessments are done. And for that, you can use certain frameworks like you have a DCAM, which is from EDMC Council, right? So which is your data capability assessment maturity. So there is a lot of principles and sub-principles that are being mentioned. So based on that, you can assess the current maturity. And based on that, you can define the target maturity. So these are all part of your inputs. Then you also have some of the activities that you're gonna do as part of it, right? Now, as part of the activities, what are some of the things that you're gonna do as part of it? So one of the important aspects that you're gonna do is primarily to identify what are the different the data governance strategy you will define. You define the readiness assessment, you perform the discovery and business alignment. You also develop a lot of organizational touch points. Then, once you define the organizational data governance strategy, as part of the planning phase, you define what is the operating framework, right? So we'll see in the next slides what are different types of operating frameworks, what are the goals, principles that I need to look into, what are the policies which I need to look into. Then once I implement then the entire change management, how I will be taking care of it. Then the issue management aspect I will look into, the regulatory compliance, right? So these are all the part of the definition phases, and then I start implementing. Now, for one of the very important component, one of the very important support that you require for the data governance is a sponsorship, right? Now, nothing comes for free, so when you start doing it, one of the important aspect is this entire objective has to be aligned from the top, because this is not like a small project is gonna go. It is a kind of a journey which everyone agrees on, right? So it starts with assessments and slowly you start doing it. And once it is done, till the time you have data in your organization, this is going to be there, right? So that is the kind, because just like you have corporate governance, corporate governance, you never say that, it will just, I will just do it and then tomorrow I will forget it. No, it is still the time the company is existing, it has to be there. So similarly, on when it comes to data governance also, sponsorship and continuous support is definitely required. Then, yeah, as part of the overall implementation, you start defining certain components of data governance, as you have seen as part of the pillars. Like you start developing the business glossaries, you start developing the data lineage. So these are all part of the implementation. You define the data governance org structure, you define the data governance operating model, you define the metadata ingestions, the pipelines, creations, your data lineages, data traceabilities, data catalogs. So all these are part of your implementations. And one of the other during the implementation, you might also have to coordinate with the different people, like from IT, from business and all, to get these certified, to get them aligned to these assets. That's a very important component. And then the training, continuously getting people involved as part of it, measuring this, right? So we will have certain metrics that we can start working on. Then what are the different types of deliverables that will come? So one is a strategy document, you will have policy documents, you have procedures documents, right? So all these kind of things will be there. You have the organization output, the organizational chart that you can create. Now this organization chart ensure that, one of the very important success factor when you're creating this organization charts is, don't try to create a data org chart which is completely different from your HR org chart, right? So when you have HR org chart, which is more like an HR organizational structure, what happens is that is more with respect to the roles that is there. Now, if you completely try to create an org chart where, you, let's say, for example, you want to create, which is actually good, like, for example, you want all the data consumers in one area, on the data suppliers and all. But what happens is it creates a lot of friction. People, firstly, they don't understand, a lot of times these data governance aspects. So take them to that maturity. You cannot say that, you all of them are part of a single separate team, then your reporting lines will keep on changing, right? So people get a lot confused. There's a lot of panic that happens. So normally what you do is when you're creating these org structures, and we'll see what are these different types of org structures, you take it in a very phase wise manner, right? So when people start understanding this data org structure and start part of it, so in the initial phase you create an org structure which is aligned to your HR org structure. The reporting lines is very similar. And then once as you keep on maturing slowly and slowly, then you can take it to a different kind of a data org structure, which, that can start complementing. So it's that's a kind of a piece of advice or a caution you can say, that don't do it, because if you start creating a new org structure completely, it will backfire you on you. People, it will start creating a lot of confusion, and people, completely get not aligned to it. Sometimes it fails that entire, the objective that you started with. So these are some of the things that you can look into. So the overall goal is to keep, you can say that it is there. So one of the few things that you can see from here is what are the key business drivers. So first is one is on the reducing risk perspective. I want to start reducing my risk. So from the risk perspective, it's more with respect to financial risk, reputation risk, because there might be regulatory issues also which might be there. Then on the data security side of things, one of the key objectives data governance looks into is how I can start protecting my data assets through different putting in different types of controls, across my entire data life cycle. Then privacy regulations we have seen in the last session also, like how I am trying to able input these different security classifications for private confidential PII data. Right? Then on the improving the processes perspective, so we have regulatory compliance. One of the very important thing is to that I should be able in a very I should be swiftly able to respond and effectively and consistently be able to respond to any kind of regulation requirements which are there. Then data quality improvements is as part of a data quality as a entire area, how I start improving my data quality, right? So we have a complete chapter on data quality. There I will speak completely on the different dimensions, the different, how do you create a data quality management processes in more detail. So that aligns to, one of the key pillars of your entire data strategy. Then metadata management also, there's a separate chapter we will see on that, how we can start creating the business glossaries, how we can start creating the data catalogs on business metadata, technical, operational metadata. Then the efficiency in the development projects, how we can start looking into these, as to how we can start addressing the issues and opportunities in data management, across in the development across the entire SDLC life cycle, how I can start working on this. Then one of the important aspect is you might be working with a lot of vendors, with fintech companies also. You see a lot of collaboration happening between the financial institutions with companies, with fintech companies, and also how your data is getting stored, what are the contractual obligations, because you will have the consumers, you will have the data providers, you will have the data suppliers, right? So these different terminologies which are there, which are all part of your data contracts. So you start looking at your data contracts, identifying your data residency, data storage, you're all part of it. So as part of your vendor management, with respect to data, you'll start seeing that this all starts coming in. Right? Now, coming to the overall goal, the goal and principles, that are three main goals and principles that is there. First is sustainability. So as I was mentioning, it is not like something that you're just going to do it and you just walk away. It is a kind of a program. It has to be continuously progressed. It will be continuously going throughout the entire life cycle, right? So one of the important aspect is the sustainability. Now, sustainability can only happen is if you have a very good leadership, if you have a good sponsorship, because and the ownership aspect also, because people have to know, understand, and take and be a part of this entire journey. Second is it has to be embedded. So data governance is not just like an add-on process. It is something that you guys, the teams have been already doing. Like for example, in the data management teams, they were already doing a lot of data ingestions and all, but they were not focusing on data quality. So what I'm doing is I'm putting this components as part of each of their existing activities they're already doing, right? So like for example, they might not be creating documentations which is on the glossaries and things because they feel that it's not required, we know it, that's kind of an attitude is there. But you have to explain them it is not like something additional you're doing, it is just ensuring that you're doing your work completely, which is actually required, and that's the reason it's not like an additional, it's like a separate program as a whole. It is part of the ensuring that all of these things are also being taken care while you're doing any of your projects. Third aspect is the measure. So data governance also has to start be measuring because obviously you see that since you require business sponsorship with your business leadership, people should also start seeing some kind of a positive financial impact. Now this is sometimes becomes very difficult, because people, a lot of these benefits that you start seeing is a more of an starts coming up as part of an extended benefit. So like for example, I'll give you, like you have improved the data quality. Now improvement of data quality is not giving you any benefit, right? But what has happened is because you have improved the data quality, the data reports that are getting generated, like some campaigns they are executing. So because of that campaign is getting executed because there is a good quality of data, there is a kind of a financial benefit that initially they were not getting, but now they have started getting. Now everyone will start feeling that the campaign has run successfully and because of it it is working, but there is an kind of extent, this has all happened because the quality has improved, you have worked on the quality of the data. Similarly, the definitions where people were struggling to make reports and now you are able to do a lot of self-service yourselves, right? Now there is a time effort benefit that you're getting, which is ultimately helping you in your profitability and those kind of things. So measuring that becomes sometimes difficult and making it people understand sometimes difficult. The other side is the regulatory side. It's very easy to explain. Supposedly you were not compliant to this and there was $1 million fine that was associated, but now you show them that we are compliant across all of them. So we have saved that 1 billion. So one is the monetary benefit. When you try to show, there are two ways of showing. One is you show a direct monetary benefit of cash coming in, or the second is how you can start avoiding this regulatory fine. So regulatory benefits and all is sometimes you can start showing them, you can say that we have saved the bank from this kind of things. But the extended things is you will have to start working with these stakeholders, your campaigns team, your contact center teams, and start getting feedback, whether this has improved. So you can start sharing some questionnaires with them, start taking periodic feedback from them so that they can start mentioning, okay, whether they were facing a lot of issues in the past and whether the entire initiative have helped them. So these kind of things, then you can start presenting to the management that can give you a lot of benefit. So these are some of the principles that you can see which will be followed as part of the strong foundation for data governance. So one is leadership and strategy. So you should have a leader who has this kind of a vision, understands a lot of these inherent benefits. It's not only about just a lot of people feel that I know this solution, I know Calibra, I know Informatica, and I am a leader in data governance, so that there's a difference in that. So one is technical implementation is completely different from being having that kind of understanding of these leadership and vision, because you will have to explain the management of these these benefits. So that kind of a leadership and strategy is definitely driven. One of the other problems with data governance is a lot of times it is IT driven. As I was mentioning, they start with us buying a tool, Informatica, they have purchased it. And trust me, I've seen, or let's say some of the other solutions they have buy, they have not used the solution for the first initial 3 years. I'll tell you, I've seen these kind of things myself. They have not used it for first couple of years, but they have to end up paying the subscription fees by the way. The reason is first is business is not aligned. Second is, when I onboard a tool, I start importing all this metadata and all. People are not ready to certify. I sometimes not understand all my complete entire data ecosystems what are there. So what happens is we end up paying a lot of these, there's expenses. These are solutions are not very cheap. These are expensive solutions. So rather than that, what you should first do is it's a business driven kind of an initiative. You should first get your business aligned. You start doing your as assessments and start creating a lot of these assets like the glossaries and all. You can start creating using your spreadsheets and all, which you can later on import also. So once you know that these have already been certified, which takes a lot of efforts, you can start onboarding them and then start giving people access. So the adoption or the accessibility could be most improved from using the solution. Third is the shared responsibility. So is a lot of problem which the data governance faces is every let's say you have a data governance officer or someone, that person will try to do everything, which is something wrong. You have to get your business, you have to get your IT analytics team, BI team, everyone part of this entire journey, the working groups and all. So there is a shared responsibility model that you should look into, not try to do everything yourself, then you will be in a mess because it requires a lot of efforts and connections between each other. Then you'll see that it is also multi-layered, right? So these data governance, initiatives happens at different levels. At the enterprise level also, it happens at the local levels also. So it is a more of a multi-layered kind of an approach. You have divisional at a divisional level, at enterprise level, at a local level. So you'll see, like for example, we see in organizations data governance officers only for an HR department, for a finance department, and then you have these data governance officers reporting to the chief data officer. So like that also you start seeing multiple data governance officers for each of the units who liaise with each other, and then you have a central data governance, a central data officer, chief data officer who works, or across the regions also it could be that data governance for India, data governance for uh, you know UK and all, and then you have a global chief data officer, who is the global chief data officer. So every one of them reports to a global chief data officer. So these kind of different models are there. We'll see that what are different types of models. And then framework based, one of the important aspect, you try to align your data governance program with some of the frameworks. Like Dama is one framework, but let's say for example, if you align with some of the ISO standards, so in ISO we have one framework for data governance. That framework, if you try align and get it certified, then people start getting a lot of weightage. Even the regulators when they come and you say that we have our data governance program certified with ISO. Right. So a lot of these certifications and frameworks, it can help you to understand that you're not missing on any of these things. And a lot of certifications gives a lot of weightage. Like, so for example, DCAM, when you do a data capability assessment, some of these organizations, they certify you that you are DCAM certified. Right. So some of these things also helps you to align your entire overall initiative. Now, principles based, there are different types of principles that would be part of it, right? So, what are these different types? These are the guiding principles you'll see that needs to. So we have seen these principles, right? So these principles will help us to align this, right? So the entire initiative, we would be able to see that we are not moving from something very different from it. And a lot of times these principles could be also reverse engineered from your policies that you would be able to see. So here you can see that how your data management and your data governance, they work hand in hand. They're not like very separately different. So you can see the data governance team primarily puts that oversight and execute, and data management team would be managing, doing a lot of those things based on the guidance from the data governance. So the oversight is being provided by data governance team, but the actual execution you'll start seeing is done by the data management team. Now, what are the different types of models that exist, operating models that exist as part of the entire data governance styles, right? So different organizations exist, they have different styles in which they would be working in data governance. So primarily we have three main models. So first model that we have is a centralized kind of a model. Now what happens is a centralized model, it works more with your sole proprietorship organizations or organizations which are very small or very simplified, not much department. So you see a founder who is also the CEO, CIO, who everything is done by him. So centralized model, what happens is the data governance organization will oversee all these activities, So the team, since the departments are not very big and, the teams are not very big, so we can keep that centralized kind of a model, at the top of it. And we see that, they would be taking care of most of the things, right? So across the different areas, data which is across your different subject areas, across the different regions, all of these functions and decisions are taken by the centralized team. Now, replicated is primarily, you will see that the same operating model will be adopted across my each business units, right? So, for example, what happens is now, rather than having a single data governance, I feel that my organizations are quite big, so I will have different data governance officers, right? And each of their work. Now, this works well for your conglomerates. Like, for example, if you see Tata's and these kind of big organizations which are conglomerates, so they have their different business units, like so different sister companies are there. Tata Motors could be one, you have Tata TCS could be one, Tata Steel could be one, so many different things. Now, if you have a single data governance unit for each of them, it might not work in because they are working in different lines of business altogether. So they might have data governance officers specific for each of them, right? Now, the problem with this could be like since each of them work independently for their business unit, sometimes what happens is you'll see these different organizations have different maturity. Like for example, you see on one side, the TCS might be growing very exponentially, performing very well, and then you have a small company within Tata's might be not functioning that well. So because maybe the data governance unit and data management layers might also not be able to suffice and help in those kind of things, right? So sometimes what happens is the organizations might be at different maturity. So this is one of a problem that happens. So if you see to combine the benefits, if we can combine both of them, so we can have like a federated kind of a model, right? So in a federated kind of model, what happens is we might have a data governance unit for each of these business units, but then we can have a central data governance, like a chief data officer sitting on the top, which who can basically they can basically work together, like at a group level, we can have a data governance or a CCDO. So what happens is it's a kind of a hybrid kind of a model, you can say. So while each of these business units will have the data governance things, but then you see there is a common data governance policy that we mention at a at a unit level or at a at a conglomerate level at a that level. So we have certain kind of policies that we can put in that will basically help us. Now this example can be also extended within a different within an organization also. Like so, for example, the different business units initially who were having different business data governance units, now I have a global or a chief data officer or data governance, which is at a company level, or a group level that could be looking into each of these business units. So these are typically you will see that these are the different types of models that could be existing in part of it. Now, typically, you'll see that this is one of an example of a sample data governance. So on one side, you can see the different data governance framework, which has the enterprise data governance office, the program management. So this is the oversight that is coming in. And there is on the right-hand side, you can see the execution that is being done. So you have the leadership team, you have the data enterprise data governance council, which is part of it. And then you have the different people, like so for the data governance teams, you have the data stewards, you have the data custodians, you have the data owners that are part of it. And on the project teams, on the PMO, you also have the project management office, you have the project governance teams who would be working with along with the data governance teams. So like this, you'll see the kind of the framework that I will try to bring in will be a more of an inclusive kind of framework which has participation from Now, this is more of a, again, like a organizational parts that you can see. So on one hand side, you can see that you have the enterprise. Now, normally you will see that whenever you're defining the data governance org structure or organizational structure, the structure mostly takes a form of a hierarchical structure, right? So on the top, you can see that you have the steering committees, you have the leadership, the management boards, which are part of it, who provides this oversight, who provides this, so it has representation from your board of directors, your CEO, CIO, CEO, all of the CXOs part of it. Then in middle layer, you can see that there is the leadership teams, like the heads. You have head of IT, you have head of different business units who are part of your leadership teams, right? So these are leadership teams who are basically will be guided by their steering committee or the CXOs, right? And these are the people who have a lot of working members, within them. So these are like the people who are actually doing, like your data analysts, your data stewards, and all who are actually doing the day in task. Now, what happens is this leadership team, which is your decisioning and programming team, they act as a bridge. So the CXOs, whatever has to be done, the leadership team will take that responsibility and will pass it on to the working groups who will be working. You know? So that kind of when you start creating this kind of an organization structure, this actually works. And because it is a very inclusive kind of a model, there is a two-way communication that you will be seeing. People who are actually working on the ground, they know what is the problem. Like for example, you start seeing a report, but these are the people who are preparing the report. They know that if there is a data quality issue, if there is a data timeliness issue, I'm not getting the data on time, or let's say, for example, the data which we are getting, we are not able to. So these people, they share these kind of inputs with their leadership teams, and the leadership teams can start highlighting. The same goes when you start implementing these data governance activities. You'll start seeing that the working members, if they are getting benefited, then that is the actual benefit that you start seeing. So supposedly, if they are preparing a report, and now they know where to find the report very easily. They have looked into the catalogs. They know they have accessed the data. They have so it brings down the entire time to access, time to use. Similarly, on the quality side, they see improvements, right? So then these feedback starts coming in. The actual working members or the actual people starts getting these benefits. They share this information with the leadership team. So obviously, if the working members gets benefited, the leadership team gets benefited. If the leadership team gets benefited, the CXOs, the steering committee, knows that this entire initiative is effective. So that level of an organization structure that you start creating. And obviously on one side you have the business teams, but you see also the IT teams definitely being part of the entire initiatives, and the operations teams also. So here you can see that data stewardship, one of the very important component when you're creating your data stewardship is primarily how, so stewardship in very important sense is to define, what is the roles, responsibility, what are the titles, what are some of their key requirements that they need to have, right? So you first identify the different roles which are part of it. Like for example, you have a data governance steering committee. So what is their role? What is the responsibility of them? So you will see that they are the people who will provide us guidance. They will be providing oversight, support, funding of all the activities, right? So you have the senior members, all the senior executives, and they are the people who needs to inform how the entire program is working. So they are the oversight people. You have the data governance council, who is primarily will be managing the entire data governance initiative, right from development of policies, metrics, issues, escalations, aspects you will look into. You have a data governance office, or a data office, you can also say. They will work on each of these data across the standards, and they will be working along with the stewards, custodians, and all. Similarly, you can have local governance teams, you can have data stewardship teams, all they would be part of it. So as you can see, different types of when you're creating your data stewardship, first is the different activities that you will be doing is you will be trying to create and managing your metadata. So you create a centralized metadata repository, because once you have a centralized metadata repository, it becomes very easy to manage all your metadata. So even there is also a trend now that the data can reside in your respective systems. You are bringing all the metadata into a single place, but then you know which is the which metadata is coming in from which systems, and managing that becomes very easy. Then how you are documenting your rules and standards, so documenting another activity which the data from a data stewardship perspective, because as I mentioned, it is not like I can define something, this has to be done in this way, as a data governance team. And then when I start sharing with people, people feel that that is not at all possible, so when you're defining or documenting these rules and standards, it also comes as a kind of a in process in that you start taking these inputs from these different people, the stewards, some of these things, get it reviewed multiple times, get it, see that if there is a consensus, just not like put something which is not at all feasible, within the organization. And that is where you see a lot of times data governance teams get a lot of backlash from the other teams, because they don't consult, they don't understand, they don't speak with different people, and they start putting in something which is not possible for the organization to implement in the currently in the immediate plan, right? So it might take some time to go to that, but you having that feedback, having that inclusion is very much important. Then how you can start managing the different data quality issues, how you can start executing the operational data governance activities, all part of it. Then now within the stewards also, so steward in the literal term is a person, who manages the property of some other person, right? So that is the literal meaning of steward. Now stewards are also someone who will start managing the data assets on behalf of someone else, right? So there could be multiple types of data stewards that is possible. And stewards plays a very important role, because they are the people who are the subject matter experts. They know a lot of these aspects about that underlying data. So you have the chief data stewards who could be who could be heading the data governance, representing the data, their respective data for as part of the council. Then you have the executive data stewards who can serve on again on the data council, and they are the senior managers and all. You have the enterprise data stewards who have an oversight of a specific data domain across my different functions. You have the business data stewards. You are the business professionals or subject matter experts you can consider. You have a data owner who is again like owning the data, like they are the business data steward or the data owners for that specific things. They are the business owners also, you can say they are for business, they are the data owners. Then you have the technical data stewards who are people from the IT or having the technical thing, background. They are like your data integration specialists, database administrators, BIU teams, and all data quality analysts and all. Then you also have the coordinating data stewards. They are primarily, they will do a lot of coordination works, So these coordinating stewards are like your business analyst and all, who does a lot of these discussions with the business and your technical stewards. They are acting like a bridge. That is part of it. Then when you're defining your data policies, so data policies will define you certain kind of directions or, the principles that you will be creating. Now, normally, typically, if you take a data policy, data policy, what are the key components of the data policies? Normally what you'll have. So first and foremost thing is what is the policy statement that you're mentioning? Now within the policy statement, what are the key, what are the key areas? What are the key inclusions that is part of the policy? What are the key exclusions which are part of the policy? What are the key risks that you can see? When you're defining these policies, so policies are always at a high level. It also takes care about when you're defining these data policies, sometimes you have seen organizations separating it out based on the type of data. Like for the policies that you want to put in for structured, sometimes for unstructured might not be exactly same. So sometimes organizations also separate it out for structured data, how it needs to happen, where the data needs to reside, who are the people part of it will be there, what are the processes will be there. So these are there. Then what are the key risks that you can see? What is how frequently the policy needs to be modified, then what are the issue management from an issue management perspective, how will you manage that? So these are some of the things that you see in policies that they basically create. So and then the detailed activities of it would be part of your those standards and procedures. So standards and procedures will describe the how part of it, and data policies will just describe what part of it, what needs to be there has to be part of policy. Now how it needs to be done, you will have to go to the standards and procedures. So that is how you'll see that these components are being a part of it. So these are certain guidelines, as you can see, should be relatively few data policies, should be brief and direct, it's very high level it should be. They should be aligned with some of the data standards and global data standards, and they should be effectively communicated. So normally these policy documents should be you should be shared with the other team members so they are aware of it. You can have certain kind of training models created that aligns to these policies. And these policies should also be accessible. So tomorrow, if someone wants to have access to it, at least the read access, you can have rights management, maintained on it so that people should be able to go and see that policy. Like HR policy, as you see, I'll just want to put an HR policy, but I should be able to have an access to the HR policy. At any point in time, I should be able to go and see it. Same goes for your data policies, right? Next, another important component is your data asset valuation. Now, so as I was mentioning, now since data is an asset, there is also I should start calculating the economic value. So this is again a very interesting aspect since because data a lot of times is very much abstract. People sometimes are not able to identify, the economic impact. So how we can start identifying the value which is again a non-fungible item. You can say like data which is non-fungible, how we can start showing the monetary aspect to make it more fungible, right? So these kind of aspects. So data asset valuation is an area where now we want to start measuring the value of data. Now, there are different ways how we can measure. One is based on the replacement cost. So supposedly one is if the data is lost, in a disaster or there is a data breach that has happened. So what kind of data, how much you will be lost. Now, there are insurances also available that supposedly if there is a data breach that has happened, so how much you want to secure the data for. So obviously you will not, you will say that I want so much high as an insurance cover, but whether the insurance company also will have to validate, right? So they validate on certain some of these aspects. What's the how much data is there? What is the criticality of the data? How much documents are there? All of it is taken. So that is primarily also one way how the data, that insurance covers or that data loss that tells you the what is the replacement cost. Then the market value, the value of the asset. Let's say, for example, you're undergoing a merger and acquisition, right? So if someone other company, why do you think that when WhatsApp is being acquired by Facebook, that valuation, how it was being calculated? So it was also based on the number of customers or what is the potential, benefit that it can start getting. Similarly, a lot of these mergers and acquisitions for these data companies are based on these market values that have been calculated. Then identified opportunities. So how I can start gaining from identify that I was mentioning. Can I look into this data and see as part of the campaign it was something that was useful? The entire initiative was useful. Now, this is one thing. Selling data is something which is very risky because you want to start selling, but maybe you start selling the insights. Maybe I see certain kind of insights coming in from my data. I don't want to sell the raw data. Now, this is very tricky because a lot of times when you start selling the data, there are legal obligations, there are legal fines that could be associated. There are a lot of regulations that are driving a lot, safeguarding this. So you cannot just go and start selling a lot of their data in the raw format. Maybe certain insights and all you want to sell. Like for example, the CRISIL reports and all, some of these reports, the Bloomberg reports and all that they are selling. Ultimately, it is for the company's valuations that they're doing, but they are not selling the raw data. They are basically selling some of these valuation insights. So that is another thing that how we can start using for getting asset, you know. Then what is the risk cost? Now, risk cost is there are different types of risk. One is with respect to the penalties, the remediation costs, litigation expenses, right? So all of this is primarily the legal fines, regulatory risk which are associated. All of it is part of it. Now, if you see, we have certain kind of these principles that forms, just like we have accounting principles, generally accepted accounting principles, like which is more on the accounting side, which is called as GAAP. So if you're someone of you are from accounting background, you will understand these are the accounting principles. So similarly, on the information side, we have generally accepted information principles. So these are some of the information principles that you'll see. One is accountability, so the everyone we should be able to identify the individuals who should be accountable for the data, the owning, the custodian, those kind of things. The asset principle. So once we identified the asset, all the data should be considered as an asset. So it should be managed, secured, and accounted very well. Audit principle is we should be able to do periodic audits, right? Should be done by an independent body. Then you also have the due diligence principle, right? So if there is any kind of a risk, so you should start highlighting those so risk management, risk reporting, risk mitigation aspects coming in. Then you also have the going concern principle. So once you start seeing, right, so data and content, since it is very critical for the success. So going concern is primarily where, if there is any kind of a business operations that will get stopped, of any kind of management activities that will get stopped because of it. Then you also have the level of valuation principle. So level of valuation is primarily can you start measure and value the data that we have seen. Liability principle is this something as a liability if it is someone else's data which we are managing, right? Quality principle we understand, risk principle, right? So we should identify all the manage inherent risk associated and start to avoid them. Then we have the value principle, so the data which is can we start measuring the marketability of the data, the goodwill associated as part of the valuation. So there is a very interesting method now where data asset valuation reports are being prepared by organizations. Some of these solutions are available which prepares data asset valuations. So there are different components they look into and they create these valuation reports and share them. So these are the principles I can show you. Now, what are the different types of activities? So I'll just cover this at a very high level. So it starts with defining the data governance, right? Objectives and what are the different shared responsibility which is there. So that is part of it. Then as part of it, what you do is you perform the readiness assessment, you do data assessment maturity. So as I was mentioning, the data management maturity, then what is the capacity to change, how much you would be able to change. Let's say, for example, I want to bring in a new technology as a whole or a new solutions, right? So is there a cultural inclination towards change? What is the kind of a readiness, like people are ready to collaborate or not? What kind of effort I will have to bring in or do to increase the collaboration? There's no business alignment. People should be aligned, right? Similarly, on discovery and business alignment perspective, so you'll see that when you're doing this assessment, you do a lot of data discovery. Like in data quality, we do something kind of data profiling. So this is all part of a discovery. What you understand, you start measuring what is your as is quality measurement on across each of these on the metadata management perspective. You define your current data discovery and alignment perspective. You start doing that. Then you also start developing a lot of organizational touch points, right? So in organizational touch points perspective, you define, identify what are your national, local, or international regulatory requirements. Then what is the budget and funding that would be required? You start estimation that year on year, it also includes people hiring. It also includes your technology solutions hiring or onboarding. Then what kind of vendors that you might have to get in? Maybe you might have people, but you might have to work with a lot of vendors. So from the vendor and procurement side, what are some of the things that you will require? So that will be part of it. Then what is the SDLC life cycle, right? So you will start seeing that as part of this, the touch points perspective, there is you can consider a kind of pyramid. So there are organizational touch points, right? From at the bottom, you'll see the asset optimization perspective, data quality programs, SDLC, agile control points, which are there. In middle on the governance side, you have the policy procedure standards, data management oversight, and regulatory compliance, and financials perspective. So all of it, you can see that the chief data office will drive a lot of these. At the touch point, it will try to develop a lot of these things. Then, what are the different strategy as part of the planning? So you create a charter. So in the charter, you define the vision, mission, what are the principles, part of it. Then you start defining the operating framework and accountability that we have seen, how you define the structure and responsibility. Then what are the implementation roadmap? So one of the very important aspect is you create an entire implementation roadmap year on year, because everything you cannot do it in 1 year or, within few months. So what are your immediate priorities? Now, this again changes, because some organizations for them data quality might be something which is very important. For some organization, data lineage, because there is a regulatory notice that they have come to you. So they want to start their journey with data lineage, right? And then you cannot say that, no, 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 no. If you want data lineage, but that's not the best practice. Government, the company will say that, see, I've got a regulatory notice. I want to first start with lineage and I don't want to get a fine. If you say that, lineage should be after 3, 5 years and then I will get a fine, So sometimes you'll see that roadmaps also gets aligned to some of the immediate organizational priorities, So and there is nothing like right or wrong about it, but you start with one of it, but you start augmenting a lot of. You can start with metadata, lineage, and all, and then take quality at the later stage, even though you have a data quality challenge which might be there, but start with some of these discovery and all aspects. Then how you start planning for your operational success. Similarly, from the defining the data governance framework perspective, as part of it. So what kind of value that you are trying to bring in for the organization? What is the business model, cultural factors, all part of it, right? So here you can see that this diagram basically tried to sum up all of it. So an operating framework would be something like this, where you have the executive council, the oversight people, and the council members being there. And then they define these policies. And they have the operations team, data governance operations team, which includes your consumer partners, products, and These are the different people from the responsibility, the data warehouse TLP teams, and the respect source members are part of it. As part of the data governance goals, principles, and policies that you are defining, so there are different types of goals, principles, and policies that we have seen. Then how you are trying to underwrite some of the data management projects. So one of the important aspect is you start creating initiatives so that you can start improving your data management capabilities. So you'll start seeing the Data Governance Council coordinating with a lot of these teams separately, and including them as part of it. So that is one of the things. Then how you engage your change management part of it, including your planning, training, systems development perspective, policy implementation, communications perspective, all of it, where you start promoting the value of the asset, start monitoring and acting on the different feedbacks, implementing the data management training, executing that, and then start identifying KPIs and metrics also. Then how you engage in the issue management. So one of the important aspect in issue management is the escalations, the conflicts that comes in, right? So, and the issue management piece, how you basically start creating some of these, right? So as you can see, at the most of the conflicts and all are happens at the lowest level, right? So many issues that could be happening at the later stewardship level. So you start identifying them, and then as you start moving up, you would start seeing that less number of conflicts and less number of issues starts happening, but most of them starts happening at the ground level. So from a data governance team's perspective, how they can start identifying, capturing, logging the issues, how they can start assigning and tracking these issues. They can start documenting the stakeholders' viewpoints. They can start determining, the documenting and communicating what are the issue resolutions, how they will be able to resolve the issues, how they can start facilitating any kind of discussions wherever it is being required, and start escalating the issues if required as well. And then you also have some of the regulatory compliance requirements. Like, for example, there are certain regulations that might come in. Like, for example, you have the cards industry, which will require, PCI DSS, payment card industry requirements might be there. Similarly, on the financials industry perspective, you have Basel Committee of Banking Supervision, which is your BCBS, that mentions certain on the data aggregation, the risk reporting, and those aspects. Similarly, the accounting laws might be mentioning, right? So you have the accounting laws and accounting standards. So there are certain kind of laws and regulations which might be industry specific. Some of them might be at a national level also, and some of them might be at the best practice. So those kind of things you start doing. And then you start implementing this data governance. So across these, when you start implementing as part of the operational part, so you start identifying what are the data standards and procedures, start, pushing this to people. You start developing data business glossaries. You start coordinating with the different architectural groups, starts getting them involved and start working, Then how you can start sponsoring each of the data asset evaluations by touching with the different people, getting it validated and getting it checked, right? So that is part of it. And then embedding the data governance as part of the overall activities. So in this activity, you basically outline the activities, define timelines to it, start dates and dates, timelines to it, and define the different techniques how it needs to be done. And then a lot of times you share a lot of these things as part of a data governance community interest. So to basically deepen the organization's understanding of data governance is something that you want to try to do. Now, for that, you might use a different set of tools and techniques. Like, for example, you can use online websites, your company websites and all, and provide links and things. You have certain data glossary tool. You can get a data governance, data management solutions. You can onboard data workflow solutions, like you can have your BPM solutions that you want to automate a lot of these workflows. Document management tools you can use. From the scorecards perspective, all of this, you can use some of the visualization tools, right? And from the guidelines perspective, so one is the organizational culture. As we have seen, this is more like a cultural shift. Obviously, it will take some time. So you will have to continuously handhold all of this entire journey. There is a lot of communication, continuously making people aware. This will be learning. This will also make certain lot of friction, because it will challenge the existing practices that they are doing, right? So you'll see that having the strategy roadmap or roadmap and a business case and trying to define that as something that is very much important. These are some of the metrics that you can use, right? So from what are the contributions that to the business objectives it has start mentioning, like if there is an already campaigns that is happening. So has it created an impact? What kind of risk reduction that I have done? How I have improved the efficiency in the operations perspective? Can I start measuring that by taking feedback from the different teams? Effectiveness perspective, how I can achieve my goals and objectives. Can I extend my stewards to start? I have to try training people on the new solutions that I would be bringing in. I will have to make people aware of the policies. What is the best way of doing it things. So any person who is newly joining the organization also have to undergo through these mandatory trainings. So they know that, okay, this is something that is part of the culture of the organization. And then these policies and all that we create, it has to be also continuously or verified, continuously, audited, and also see that if it is effective or if it has to be modified. So those kind of things you have to done. So conformance to these policies and standards is one side. At the same time, you have to optimize, you have to modify, you have to continuously, uh, track and continuously start looking into making more. So I think this is something on data governance. Next is on the slides, we have certain questions. I'm not covering this. What you can do is you can look into it. So there is a answer will be given to you, and then there could be an option that can come. So exercise of the control, authority control, and is referred to as data governance. Right. So page 67 on the book, you'll be able to get this line. Right. Sometimes you get these questions like this, and you will be given options. So you need to select the right option from it. So there are certain of these questions are being mentioned, almost like around 15, um, around 25 questions are there. I think what you can do is you can look at. Okay, so I'll take a pause. I'll stop sharing and just wanted to see if there is anything. Let me just quickly see if there's any questions in it. So this is primarily on data governance, but this is again a very important component as part of your data strategy. Data governance has to be there. Yeah, so I see some questions. I'll take it quickly. In an organization, just a minute. Marches. Okay, no, I think these are all questions. So I don't see any questions for today. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. I'll wrap up the session then. And what we'll do is I'll share this recording and the content also. So for you can go through it. Not a very difficult topic in itself. There's a lot of concepts, but when you start executing from a theoretical understanding, this is good. But when you actually start doing it in the organization, you'll start seeing that's very interesting area in itself. It's a world in itself, when you start doing each of these. The first thing is you have to understand what it needs to be done. Or sometimes data governance teams, they feel that, they have to do a lot of these things themselves, which is not the actual case. A lot of these things might have to be done by the data management teams. You just need to see and have that clarity of what can should be done by data governance team and what should be done by the management teams. Right. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a nice day. Enjoy your time. And I'll meet you next time for the next session on one of the topics on data. Thank you.